Filtered episode 350. I am your host, Blaine Pudvey, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Smith.
I can't believe we made it to 350. Hey, how's it going?
Trege Wilson,
Hello.
and a special guest, Mark Schieg of the Hockey Writers, who covers the Columbus Blue Jackets. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Well, thank you. I feel honored that it's show number 350 and I get to join you guys.
We're just finally happy to have you here. We've been waiting and waiting. I mean, you're a busy guy.
Very busy guy, but always make time for you guys.
We bumped Craig Button so you can come on, just so you know.
That's true.
So much to live up to now.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do the show as if it's a bunch of wrestlers. Really go over the top.
Over the top rope. Okay, I think I'm ready now. Let's go.
All right, so the topics of today's show are essentially the draft. The Canadiens are completely eliminated and they had no hope of making the playoffs. They got fifth overall, and now everybody is wrestling on social media about who the Canadiens are going to get. Well, before the Habs even get to the podium, there's a couple teams ahead of them, and one of them is the Columbus Blue Jackets, and that team has a very big hand in what the Canadiens are going to do. The consensus is the three names available will be Matvei Michkov, Will Smith, and Leo Carlsson. So whoever's left of those three are what the Canadiens are going to likely pick. So, Mark, we brought you on. We wanted to get the point of view of the Columbus Blue Jackets. So I just wanted to start it off with a question on Kekalainen. It's his 10th year with Columbus. Is he going to buck the trend and actually pick the Russian star, or is he going to go a different direction?
Well, I mean, based on the comments of Kekalainen actually today on local radio in Columbus, and John Davidson in a separate interview on local radio in Columbus, and what they've told us on the record, and I'm going to put this as bluntly as possible because they did the same thing. The Columbus Blue Jackets are not expected to take Matvei Michkov. We're going to just throw that right out there right now. John Davidson's quote, and I'm not exactly looking at it right now, but it was, "We're going to take a center. I'm telling you, we're going to take a center." And then that was end of quote. And any Blue Jackets fan knows it's a sore spot. Always has been. They've really never had a true number one center. That's why there's a lot of disappointment in the way that they fell from 2 to 3, because that kind of bumped them out of the Bedard and the possibly Adam Fantilli situation. So, yeah, to buck the trend, I don't think they're going to look at Michkov at all, not based on the public comments. They basically guaranteed on the record that they're going to leave Nashville with a center. The question is which one. And Davidson even went as far as saying that they think they know who they're favoring at this point, but said that they still had to do evaluation. You know, Leo Carlsson's playing at the World Championship. They have the NHL Combine coming up in Buffalo next month. They just had their amateur scouting meeting. So from the Blue Jackets standpoint, we think the decision is going to be between Leo Carlsson and Will Smith. But I'll just throw a bonus out there, because sometimes Kekalainen might, be picked Pierre-Luc Dubois a couple of years ago when it wasn't expected. So there could be a curveball there. Do they pick a guy like Dvorsky? Maybe do they like somebody like that as a little bit of a surprise? That would be shocking, but you can never rule it out with him. But if they're leaving with the center, they're going to look at all the top centers and see who they like the most. But it does seem like it's going to be between Carlsson and Smith at this point. And literally, it feels like a coin flip, right?
Well, with those two, Carlson's been known to switch back and forth. Are they looking more towards homegrown talent at this point? I mean, it is the Columbus Blue Jackets. It's a very patriotic name and look. Would they go for the American over the Swede?
They'll go for what they feel is the best available player. That's always been their MO. Now, that's going to be put to the test because, at least in my opinion, I think Michkov is the higher talent of everybody. But he's a winger, and he's also not coming over for a couple years because of his contract. So then he kind of qualified that. At least Kekalainen has in the past by saying if there's somebody that's really close on their list, like if there's a couple names that they're considering, Then they'll look at positional. So it does seem as though that the two centers are going to rise up as a result of that. They believe in the draft. They believe in just whoever is going to help them now and in the future. It doesn't matter what nationality. If it's someone from Finland, great. If it's someone from Sweden, fine. If it's someone from the United States, fine. It doesn't matter to them. They meet with all their scouts. They do what every other team does, and they come up with who they feel like is their best available player. And at this point, based on what we know on what is out there in the public, we think it's Carlson, we think it's Smith, and then they have to make a decision on which player do they feel like has the higher upside, which one's going to fit on the team better. And they have a lot of questions that they have to answer. It seems like that they're kind of set, but that's going to be the intrigue. That's going to be the entire talk between now and then, is what they do, and then the domino effect after that. Because we believe that, of course, Bedard's going to go to Chicago. It would be an absolute upset if Fantilli does not go to Anaheim. I guess there was a little bit of a school of thought that would they look at Michkov? Would they even look at Leo Carlsson? Do they think that Carlsson is better? Because there's some that have Carlsson real close to Fantilli. That World Championship could play a role in that. So, if the Ducks decide Carlsson, then Blue Jackets will race to the podium in Nashville and take Fantilli. But yeah, they believe in homegrown talent at the end of the day, and this is something they're going to get a really good player to add to one of the best prospect pools in the league. So they're going to leave happy no matter what, despite how the lottery went.
Do you think they might take a risk at that third overall pick? Go with just spitballing here, but actually do lean towards Michkov because they have another first round pick where they can probably get another center?
No, I don't think they will. I know there's a school of thought about the number of Russians on the Blue Jackets already. They have Dmitry Voronkov that just signed his ELC coming over from the KHL, is going to play center ice for them, but in the bottom six. They have Kirill Marchenko already. They have Yegor Chinikov already, who are both expected to be important players down the line. We actually asked Marchenko about Michkov at the end of season, and just real funny Marchenko kind of speech. He said, "Good scorer, like goal scorer." Like they played together, so there's a familiarity there. But given the drastic need for center, I would actually put it at 0% chance that they take Michkov. If center wasn't as big of a need, then you have to have the discussion, because you're talking about a generational talent. And if they take a center, they're going to pass on what many consider to be a generational talent in Michkov. A couple of years from now, he's being equated to a Nikita Kucherov. And how many teams would want somebody like that? Literally everybody. But when you have a situation like the Blue Jackets, everything going on in Russia too, you can't forget there's still a war going on. So I can't see them do it. Yeah, I actually wrote about it the other day that we have to consider it, but based on their recent comments, I just don't see it. They're putting it out there, and the need is too glaring for center.
Do you think between sorry, Blaine, if I cut you off. Do you think
Go ahead.
being Carlson and Smith, they would want to go with someone that might be a little closer to joining the NHL, or do you think they're willing to be patient with Will Smith if they go Will Smith way?
That's the question, and that's a great question, because yes, so Carlson checks all the boxes. He's got the size, he's got the good skating, he can play 200-foot game. There's some out in the scouting industry that believe that he can eventually be a cornerstone piece. Like as I mentioned earlier, he played both wing and center. He's the youngest player ever from Sweden to play in the World Championships for them. That's just saying a lot. He lined up as their top center in Friday's game against Germany. So now it's a lot of respect for somebody that they think can do it. So if the Blue Jackets believe that he's a cornerstone piece, you take that pick and you run to the podium. But what's going to make it a coin flip is Will Smith. Listen, he put up numbers better than Austin Matthews did, better than Jack Hughes did. And he's got a little bit of a more elite offensive upside. Smaller player, hasn't played against men like Carlson has. So that's where the decision is going to be. Do you take the guy that could theoretically make a run at the NHL next year, if not next year, the season after that? Or do you take the guy in Smith that, he's going to go to college for a year, maybe 2 years, depending on how his development goes at Boston College, and do you go for that particular upside? That's what they have to weigh. They have to weigh which of the two is going to have a better career. If I was the one picking right now, based on just what I know and I've seen both, they're both great players. I think they're both going to be wonderful players for a long time. I would still, at least right now, lean on Leo Carlsson just because I think he just checks more of the boxes and what Columbus is looking for. Someone with size, someone with speed, someone that could be a potential dominant number one center. Just gets two slightly different players there. I just think that ultimately favors Carlson, but the elite upside of Smith is going to make it a discussion.
And what are the chances of Columbus trading that third overall pick?
Less than zero. They're not going to trade that pick unless Connor McDavid is offered to them. Unless they can package it to go up to number 2, maybe to take Fantilli. I don't think Anaheim's interested in that. So, yeah, that's not going to be an option at 3.
I'm just asking because there's rumors going around that Montreal might be looking to trade up, but I don't see them having the assets besides that number 5 pick
so much.
To trade up. So
could you maybe here's a hypothetical for Montreal. Could you talk to the Sharks? Maybe are there teams below Montreal that's trying to trade up to number 4? Let's say that one of the centers falls down and they want to grab a center. Does that force Montreal to talk to San Jose to see if they can swap picks to prevent someone else from jumping up? Just a thought.
It'll obviously depend on the ask from Greer. That's for sure. Yeah. He's a new GM. He's going to want to make an impact himself.
Exactly.
So, quick question about the Jackets. Going into next season, they're pretty much going to be the same team on paper. There's a lot of guys that there's not a lot of guys that they're re-signing. It's literally going to be almost the same team on paper. Going to get Werenski back, etc. Do you think this puts added pressure on the general manager to make a kind of a home run pick, knowing that they're likely not going to be picking in the top 3 for a while again?
Well, that's the thing. He came out and said, Kekalainen came out and said, we're sick of missing the playoffs. And when you have as far to go as the Blue Jackets do from 31st place up to a playoff spot, they have a long, long way to go. And you make a good point about most of the roster assigned. They already have 21 players under contract next season, but they still have around $17 million in cap hit, give or take, with whatever Cap Friendly was saying there. This isn't the team that we're going to see at the beginning of next year, though. It's not a matter of if they make moves. It's going to be a matter of how many moves they make and how big they are. Right. There's already Kevin Hayes rumors coming out of Philadelphia. That trade wouldn't take much because Hayes has a bunch of term left and $7 million. That's not going to cost a first-round pick. The Blue Jackets already opened to moving their second first-round pick for help as a top 4 left defenseman, especially. And that's filling in the Gavrikov void from the trade to the Kings. They have to get their goaltending in order. That was absolutely atrocious. Their defense was absolutely atrocious. But again, half their lineup was AHL regulars, so not really much you can expect from that. Voracek is now traded his contract. He might not play again because of a concussion. But you look at the Blue Jackets as an overall whole, there's still a lot of reason to be excited. Where the gap is, though, is they have to get the talent pool and the prospect pool that they have, which is good, and they have to turn it into something.
Right.
That's going to be Kekalainen's goal here. So they're going to add that top 3 player. They're going to possibly add somebody. It's a deep enough draft that they could very easily keep the pick if a guy slips down enough. And then they also have the second pick in the second round. So that's 3 of the first 34 picks in this draft, and a pretty kind of top-heavy draft where they can get some impact players there should they choose to.
Right.
But they have to remake their center depth, and that's already started. Voronkov's on the way in. Alexander Texier is back from his stint over when he left the team, so he can play wing or center. Gaudreau's back. Laine is back. Jenner is back. Wonder about Jack Roslovic. That's an interesting situation in itself to see if there's even room on the roster for him. Marchenko, Kent Johnson. So it seems like the wingers are set. It seems like part of the center depth is set. But if they don't get a guy that can jump in next year into the top 6, then you're looking at the trade market. That's why Kevin Hayes is out there and amongst other things. So, yeah, there's going to be moves, though. Even though there's a lot of guys already coming back, Yeah, if they want the playoffs, they have to be aggressive. They're just way too far behind. They have too much ground to make up. So it's going to be interesting.
So it's safe to say that beginning of last season or this season, Columbus did not see themselves as a bottom 5 team, correct?
Oh no. The injury situation and almost 600-man games lost. They lost Werenski in November. That really derailed them. Line was in and out of the lineup. Even Gaudreau and his Ironman streak ended. And there was not one Blue Jacket that played 82 games. Everybody was impacted in one way or another. So it was just nuts. But Brad Larson got fired, we think, because of some of the culture inside of the room. Like, we knew it wasn't his fault that the injuries happened. He didn't have a full roster, but he was still being evaluated on how guys were handling things, and that winning culture that everybody talks about. Well, there just wasn't much winning, and they ultimately decided that they had to absolutely move on from him. So they still don't have a coach. We're here approaching the middle of May, and like a couple other teams, they're without a head coach. So that's going to be an important hire. They have to get a goalie coach for Merzlikins. That's going to be an important hire. Kekalainen's on the hot seat here. This is now the second time that he's made a coaching change due to firing. Tortorella was a mutual agreement, so we don't necessarily count that one, but he has to get this one right. If he doesn't get this one right, then we could be starting to look at the end of his tenure here with the Blue Jackets, but we'll see. A lot has to play itself out.
Can you see that being a retread, or can you see that being someone within the organization?
It could be, it could be someone in the organization. I know Larson was last time, and that didn't work out, but there's a guy by the name of Pascal Vincent. That's a very popular name out there that a lot of teams seem to think that he's eventually going to be a head coach. It would not surprise me that they interview him. But I do think that there's going to be some retreads. I know they've had interviews. I don't know who's been a part of that yet. They're down to a short list. I would guess somebody like Peter Laviolette's in that list. Now that the Devils are out, I'd be really curious to see if they give Andrew Brunette a call to see if they can get him to come over. But yeah, I think they have to have someone with experience, because this is such a young team that needs to develop, that needs to be taught what life is like in the National Hockey League. So, I understand the argument about retreads and stuff, but you hope that some of those coaches have learned something over time to make themselves better for the next opportunity to be more successful. Hopefully they do that. We'll see where it goes. I know they want to make a decision soon. They kind of reiterated that on the radio today, that they're down to a short list and they want to get this done sooner rather than later.
Now, you a little bit earlier mentioned that Kekalainen is on a hot seat.
Yep.
Do you think that's going to force his hand to make a move to bolster the lineup now?
I think it will. That the standard for them is the playoffs every year. Whether they get there or not is a whole different story. But it was a bad year for everybody. That organization from top to bottom had to have been embarrassed with the way that they played. Like, I even tweeted, what the hell are we watching out here? Like, it looked like midget hockey at times. Like, there was no defense being played. It just seemed like guys checked in and out whenever they wanted. Something just seemed very, very off. And, that reflects top to bottom. Like, you have to ask questions of everybody, from general manager, the president, to all the players, to all the coaches. It doesn't matter. They had to go top to bottom with this. They decided that Larson and Manny Legacy were the ones that they had to get rid of. He's definitely feeling pressure. He has to do something. Fans are quite sick of all the promises. Oh, the Blue Jackets, we're going to get to the playoffs. The only thing that matters is the Stanley Cup. They've made it to the second round of the playoffs once, and they've yet to win a second round series ever. So 10 years in, he's gotten some good praise for some of his drafts, but he's missed two. And some of his decision-making along the line here too, it's been questionable. So, it feels like that this could be a last chance for him. Certainly not too late, but, the eyes of the hockey world are now squarely on him because he made the move. Now he's got to own it.
Now, on that 23rd overall pick, well, where it sits right now, the second first round pick that Columbus holds. Yep. If he were to move that, would he be targeting a defenseman, scoring? Like, what would he be really looking for
Top
if you were to
4D.
move that?
Absolutely a lefty. Lefty,
Yeah.
if it's a trade. Yep. I think there's some free agent options that are kind of curious out there. Like the Devils just got eliminated. There's a couple guys like Ryan Graves, I think's under contract. Damon Severson is probably not. I think he's a pending UFA. Those would be a couple guys that I would certainly take a look at. But ever since Gavrikov left, you have Werenski on the left side. He's your clear-cut number one defenseman. There's even some question about who's Werenski's partner going to be on the right side. Is it going to be Adam Boquist? Is it going to be someone like Andrew Peak? Is it going to be someone like Nick Blankenberg? Really don't know. They think camp is going to kind of determine a lot of that. David Juracek might be ready for the NHL, and he's thought of as the kind of the number one right D of the future. Had a great year in the American Hockey League last year. I think he'll get every opportunity to be in that role. But, Jake Bean in and out of the lineup had a huge injury last year. They thought maybe they can get something from him on the left side of D. Hasn't been healthy enough to do that. So top 4, second pair, left side. It would be absolutely stunning if they don't address that. They're on the record as saying that they'll use that pick. It's available, and to be able to find that top 4 left-handed D. Like they're going to be aggressive with that thing. So if there's someone that wants to get back into the first round, maybe there's someone that doesn't have a first round pick at all. Bidding's open. That pick's for sale.
So, for instance, a veteran Stanley Cup champion defenseman who plays a mobile yet physical game?
Now, depending on who you're talking about, depending on what the rest of the story is, that could sound interesting.
You talk about Joel Edmondson.
Yes.
Oh, I was going to say it rhymes with Redmondson, but
yeah. Well,
I had to tie it in.
They're going to look at all options. They have to get, like I said earlier, they're young. They need a veteran presence. They need someone that's going to be able to kind of smooth things over. So yeah, never say never. I don't know about that name in particular, but they'll look at all the options.
I'll tell you what, we'll give you Savard and Edmondson for both your first round picks.
Oh yeah, homecoming for Savard. Eh?
What a deal!
What a steal! And what was the Keka line? Oh yeah, if someone tries to call him, click.
Unless it's the delivery guy saying that the pizza's at the door, he ain't answering.
That's exactly right. And that's if he even likes pizza too. But I'm sure he does.
Well, I mean, who doesn't?
Well, those that can't have gluten.
There's ways. There's ways.
There are ways. But I know people that don't like pizza, and I'm like, what's wrong with them?
Well, speaking of what's wrong, Matt, you had a question about someone who's had some issues about what's wrong with him.
Yeah. You cover the Jackets. I want to know, with all the rumors swirling around Pierre-Luc Dubois possibly coming to the Montreal Canadiens.
Boy, yep.
You know all about this guy. Just I'm wondering maybe your thoughts on him since he came over from with the Screaming Eagles, right?
Yes, yeah. Exactly. I mean, I was at the draft in Buffalo when that pick was announced, and I can still hear the audible woes in the crowd when that pick was announced. It was just the most unbelievable experience in the moment that I've ever been a part of, just the shock value. But Columbus at that point was still looking for a number one center, and they believed Pierre-Luc Dubois was the answer, number one center. And for a while, it looked okay. I mean, he was involved in the upset against Tampa. He was involved in beating Toronto in the bubble in the pre-playoff.
Who doesn't beat Toronto in the
Next
first
year
round?
Comes up, he quit. He literally quit on the team. And that's the prevailing memory. That game against Tampa, when he went in the corner and just literally quit. Tortorella benched him. It was an embarrassing moment. And that's when the trade came down for Line A and Roslovic, and then Dubois going up. Dubois is interesting. I obviously got to know him, got to interview him. Very, very personal. Someone that I enjoy interviewing. So in that sense, on a personal level, he's a good guy. I am just not sure about the approach he took, because if his ultimate end goal is to get to the Montreal Canadiens, listen, if he's from around there, it's a dream of his, bless him. He can, try to do that. I just feel like that he could have handled his situation better, because eventually he has a chance to be an unrestricted free agent when the time comes, and he can just say, look, I'm going to eventually at that time go and join the Montreal Canadiens. And now, he's trying to possibly get there, a little bit sooner, depending on the way it goes. I'll give him credit, even though everything came out, he still was an important part of the Jets lineup and still performed as best he could. There wasn't like a quitting situation like there was in Columbus. We still don't know to this day what it was. He admitted it wasn't Tortorella. I'm not going to speculate on that because he never went into reasons why, but he's always kept that to himself. There was something that bothered him, and he couldn't handle Columbus, and that's his prerogative. Don't necessarily agree with what he did, but it's still a decision they ultimately made. But if he ends up on Montreal and he has his focus in the right place, that's a monster piece, because you're talking about a 1C that can physically dominate and can literally take over a game when he wants to take over a game. If he's able to consistently do that, that would elevate Montreal to a different level. You add him to the likes, obviously you guys know who your core is there. That's a huge piece to be able to add to that. So if you have to give stuff up, and that's ultimately going to be the question here, is just what do you have to give up and how it all will work out. But if you do land him and he's in a good space, that's a huge upgrade.
The good space is the key. I think a lot of Montreal fans are afraid of Drouin 2.0. Mm-hmm. Although I'm a bit of a Drouin defender. I don't think Drouin. I think Drouin's expectations were just too high, not the fact that he was a lazy player. Drouin was who he was. Yep. And I think fans just had a higher expectation for him than what he could fulfill. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, a lot of people don't agree with that, but I think that's what a lot of fans are afraid of when it comes to Dubois. I look at Dubois and I say, if he wants to play here, if this is where he wants to be, then why would he not put every effort in to be the best player he can be 100%. On the team that he wants to be on?
That's his heart. So, he would give it. That's his dream. He's going to do it. Yep. So
that's the way I look at it. And I'm on the fence on whether they should trade for him or wait for him. Right. So I'm not the GM. I'm not Kent Hughes. Kent Hughes to me seems like a pretty smart GM so far. I don't think he's going to make a move that he thinks is going to put the team behind the 8 ball. So
yeah, he's not going to go out and just randomly do it just because Dubois wants it to happen. He's going to look at the best interest of the Montreal Canadiens and handle it that way. And if the opportunity does come up, he'll certainly investigate that.
Yeah.
I think he's done a very nice job in the early going of trying to establish what he wants to do. And I think that would be off course for him if he tried to force an issue.
He just wants to draft every kid that plays in Boston College. That's all he really wants to do.
Boston University. Will Smith then, eh? Is that
Will Smith, Leonard? He's gonna draft them all. Yeah. That whole line.
What a team that's gonna be. That'll be
actually Boston College is going to be probably one of the best NCAA teams in the league or in the United States. Just that line alone is going to dominate.
Definitely. It's going to be fun.
Matt, anything else on that?
I got nothing. That was great. That was fantastic. It's nice to hear. It's nice to hear from someone outside of Habs land when it comes to a player like that.
Yeah, Mark, you got to realize in Habs land, you either hate the player or you love the player. There's no in between.
Yeah, there's no gray area.
There's no gray either. You either hate them or you love them.
Yep. Love the passion, guys. It's
PK Subban, Max Domi, Jonathan Drouin, Pierre-Luc Dubois doesn't even play for them. But Michkov, who's not even drafted yet.
But I gotta say, Mark, I do agree with you. I really do. And the fact that he didn't give up on Winnipeg, and he still played hard. He was a performer in the playoffs, and you got to hope that if it does play out, from really what I'm hoping for is that Dubois kind of forces their hand, and Montreal gets him for a cheaper price than what he actually is worth.
Yeah, it's just like everything, the cost factor. Yep. Right.
And if not, you get him as a UFA the next season.
Yep, exactly right.
Or you offer sheet him.
Oh, speaking of offer sheets, hello.
That would be a bold move. No, because Winnipeg, I don't think Winnipeg has much cap space.
I don't think so either. But they're that's another team that's going to be a whole lot of moves going their way with knowing that they're bringing their coach back after the way he spoke afterwards, and which was well deserved to the players, but that core is going to get shaken up as well.
Well, Blake Wheeler won't be back.
No.
How? Now, Mark, you also cover the Erie Otters and the OHL, and there's been a lot of talk recently, especially in the French media, about some scouts in Ontario stating that Beck is going to be a better pro than Wright. Is there anything you've seen in the last couple of years that could back that up?
Ooh, that's a great question about Beck. I'm a huge fan of Beck. I remember being at the Combine last year. I talked to both Beck and Del Belbaluz together, and they were both tremendous. Like, you could tell, like, there was a special player there. And as soon as Montreal grabbed them, like, we're going to hear about this guy for a long time. I personally hadn't heard the comparison that he could be up there with Wright. I still would prefer Wright in the long run, but there's a player there. A Montreal fan should absolutely be excited. Just the way that he can take over a game, the skill that he's got. I mean, there was a reason why he was trusted in Mississauga before he ultimately was traded in the OHL. Yeah, I mean, that's a potential player there for sure, especially right down the middle. So I don't know about the right thing though. I mean, I still think that Wright is ultimately. I think a lot of people forget that Wright lost a year with with COVID. I know a lot of guys did, but especially him, someone of his caliber. And so I think there's still a little bit of a learning curve into catching up with him. And ultimately, I think we're going to see Wright do really well, but Beck still, I think, can reach top 6 level, 100%. I really do believe that.
It's going to be interesting then if Montreal does get Pierre-Luc Dubois and maybe a Will Smith. Where's Beck going to fit in? If he has top 6 potential, and you right now have 3 top 6 centers. I mean, I could see Dubois maybe moving to the wing.
Michkov. I mean, cough.
Oh no, too many good players. What a shame.
Will Smith moves to the left wing.
Is it settled that Montreal's looking at a center?
No, it's not.
No. Well, from what Ken Hughes says, he's looking at the best player available. And he said when it comes to the 5th pick, if Michkov's there and he can find, if there's someone there with more talent than Michkov, they're going to go with the player with more talent.
You have to go with the player with more talent. This is a generational talent. I mean, you look at the video, we're talking about a guy that hasn't been in the league since Ovechkin in terms of the kind of talent you have. So it's a fascinating case study about how far he's going to fall, but there's a certain level, like reward risk. Where is the fine balance? And we're going to learn about a lot of teams and the way they value risk and reward. At what point do you take a generational talent? Talent is eventually going to win out. Someone's going to greatly, greatly benefit by taking the dive.
Agreed.
Now, the rumor is that I've heard out of Russia anyway, nothing confirmed other than his agent in Russia saying Michkov will be at the draft in Nashville. So if he's there in person, and he has stated in the past that he wants to be in the NHL, I start to wonder just how much risk are they going to attribute to him?
Well, let's see if he's at the Combine in Buffalo too. I know that the OHL, I know I'm going outside of the leagues here, but the import draft's coming up, and they've already banned the picking of Russians and Belarusians that are not affiliated with the league yet for another, it's like within the last 24 months sort of situation. So, we'll see. There's a lot of teams that are concerned, not only because of the Russian situation, but also the fact that he is under contract till the 26-27 season. And if you're a team that ultimately has a situation where they want to get a generational talent like that, at some point it's going to be too much to pass up.
But could he come to the Combine and then never go back?
I suppose it's always possible, but if his goal is to be in the NHL, you would think that he would want to do everything that he can to prove how serious that he is.
And I'm just thinking, like, could he come to North America and just never go back to Russia? How would that affect his contract, I wonder?
Well, I mean, that's for a star like that, though, that's the crazy part about it, is some Russians that the KHL would be okay to allow to leave, even if it's an early contract termination. Somebody like Michkov, who's as good as they are, there's going to be a massive fight with the current team that he's on. They're going to want him to honor that contract. There's always a way, I guess, if you want to try and break it early, but I would be really shocked. And the story that I've heard is that he's going to stay and work out his contract the whole time.
Yeah, and I've heard that too. I'm just bringing up Statsny brother, hypothetical Cold War 1980s type.
We can slip him one of those fancy new Canadian passports.
Right? I do know of a very gray Canadian cruise ship that's going to be up there really soon.
There's one there right now. Actually, no, it's not there now. It's in Italy, I think.
Hey, OPSEC.
It's all over Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, it's by the boot. It's by the boot.
I mean, not Italy, not Italy, the country. I mean, Little Italy.
Fleet Week. All right. Do you guys have anything else for Mark?
No. Now that I know that Michkov is probably going to be Montreal, and we're going to have another one of those I hate everything Montreal does versus I don't hate everything Montreal does type scenarios. I'm pretty good.
What about Handsome Matt?
I got nothing.
And I don't have much of anything else. Mark, is there anything you wanted to pass on to our listeners?
Yeah, well, Montreal fans, listen, I'm a huge fan of where you guys are going. Kent Hughes, I think, is a good leader. I love Marty St. Louis as a coach. He was kind of brought up under Tortorella, had to spend a little bit of time in Columbus, actually, kind of learning off of Torts. I think the leadership's in a good place. I think you guys are going to add someone very exciting to your prospect pool, whether it be one of the centers, whether it be Michkov. And we haven't even talked about some of the guys below them. There's some really good talent down below them, too, that absolutely deserve top 10 consideration as well. So Montreal should be excited. They're heading in the right direction. And I think within a reasonable amount of time, we can expect them to be back in a place where we're seeing them part of the playoff conversation. Stick with it. You're in a good spot.
Well, that's the most upbeat we've ever seen on this show.
Well, I believe in a lot. I love Suzuki. I got to cover him in the OHL. He's a really quality leader. Just the way that he's just embraced everything. Montreal certainly has some work to do. There's some moves that have to be made, but I trust the guys that are in charge there. Ken Hughes is somebody that actually is pretty good friends with the Erie Otters general manager. So we've gotten to kind of talk to Dave Brown a little bit about what Hughes is about. Yeah, I believe in where you guys are going. I just think that the leadership is in a good spot.
Well, Mark, I really want to thank you for coming on the show, sharing your insight on the breadth of information that you've provided on the Jackets, the draft, the OHL, some of the Canadiens prospects. Why don't you just let our listeners know where they can find you and your work?
Yeah, so no more blue check mark. I'm not paying Elon Musk or anything on that at all, but you can find me out there.
I'm not. No, I'm done. It went up to $15 and I cut it off.
Yeah, good idea. It's not. I understand there's other things that you can get out of it, but no, not good enough. So I'll still be out there. It's at Mark_Schieg. Also at the Hockey Writer. Get our draft guide. We'll get you prepared. Just a lot to talk about here. The next month things are really going to start to pick up. So look forward to having you. Love to talk to you out in the social.
Yeah. Mark, thank you very much for coming on the show. We can't wait to see you in Nashville. We'll catch up there for sure.
Yep.
And for our listeners, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. I know this is something that some of our listeners have been asking for, is a point of view from some of the other teams around the Canadiens in that draft area. So again, Mark, thank you very much for coming on. And for our listeners, if you're talking about it,